Meisha, what a pleasure to have you with us. And we'll jump straight into it. I've followed you for a long time on LinkedIn, so I kind of know what you talk about and what you've been up to. So I'm going to just start off with a very basic question, and let's see. Like, I'd love your insights on this, right? So, if someone is getting started with content marketing in their organization, so what do you think are the first 3 or 5 things they should be doing?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for having me here today. I think I definitely pull off of experience from this. This is my third dedicated content marketing role. So I've definitely made a few mistakes early on in my career. What I would say now, based on my experience, the first 5 things you should do. Number one, learn the product or service. So I'm coming at this with a B2B SaaS perspective, but even if you work in something that's more service oriented, you should be a power user of your product or have a very deep expertise in whatever field you're working in. So go through the onboarding, go through client training sessions, do the academy or the certifications if that's something that your company offers, and really get inside the product. And even if it's maybe a product, I'm lucky. I work in MarTech, so I have the ability to actually use the products that I've marketed, which is great. But even if that's not an option for you, let's say you market an HR software, partner with the teams that do use the product so you can get inside of it and get inside how they actually use it. Really do whatever you need to do to deeply understand your product. Obviously, this gets a little bit more complicated if you're working in enterprise, where you have maybe solutions consultants or you have a really robust, product marketing team. That's great. These people are your friends, and you should absolutely tap them and partner with them. But really, you need to know at least the fundamentals and the basic understanding of your product or service. So that's number one. Number two, I would say is get to know your customers and your community. So even if you're not in a customer client facing role, which most internal marketers are not, make these folks your friend. So meet with people across sales, across onboarding, across customer success, support, all these different roles that directly interact with your audience. You need to be talking to them. Number three, I would say, is learning the business and marketing priorities for the year and then how content fits into the overall picture. So really thinking about at a high level, what are the company goals for this year? More specific than we need to generate revenue. That's a given, right? Like your company needs to make money, but what's the overarching vision and what are the top 2 to 3 priorities? And also understanding, how the company grows. Do they have a product-led growth model? Very popular in SaaS. Are they more enterprise and you have a sales-led growth model? So figuring out how the company actually grows and generates leads and nurtures those leads, that's really helpful context when you're setting your content strategy. And then also understanding, the revenue breakdown. How does the company make money, or what are their biggest focuses? Is it generating net new business? Are they moving up market or more enterprise? Do they have an ABM strategy? What are those types of target accounts? Thinking about retention, is that a priority? Are you trying to reduce churn and increase the loyalty and stickiness of your product or service? Or upselling and cross-selling, are you trying to generate more revenue per customer? Again, all very helpful context when you're thinking about your content priorities. From there, this will funnel down to marketing. How does marketing feed into these goals? Does the marketing team as a whole own a pipeline or revenue goal? And then from there, this trickles down into content individually. So I think anytime you're thinking about content, you can't just walk into it with, we want to increase organic traffic as a vanity goal. It has to really level up to these bigger marketing and company goals. So that's number 3. Number 4, getting a little bit closer to content, creating or refining your style guide. This is something that kind of, I think, goes overlooked, or, you might already have one, and that's great. But really take the time and dig in there and see, are folks happy with it? Does it actually match where the company is and the brand is today? Is it actually being used, and is it consistent across, your writing and your channels? And see if it needs any changing or updating. And maybe your company doesn't have one. Great. This is your opportunity to create that and build that for your company and start building this, holistic tone and voice that's seen across all of your, not just content, but like really all of your communications. This was something I had the opportunity to do at Goldcast and was definitely like a priority 0 item for me to create this guide for all of our comms. And then finally, we're finally getting to content. I've had 4 things you should do, and we haven't talked about content yet. But I think after you've done all these other things and have the context you need, then you can start your auditing, benchmarking, and planning. So getting access to the tools that you need, or having the ability to ask for tools that you need to do your job effectively. Learn the existing processes, the workflows, and improve those as needed. Don't go in right away and start making all these changes. Really get a feel for the lay of the land, how things work, and then start making those changes. And then, do your content audits, your mapping, seeing where your gaps are. All those other things come after you get the context that you need to really feel informed and confident that the plan that you're creating for content and your programming is going to impact the business.
I love the fact that we hardly spoke about content, because I truly feel that we don't talk about it enough, but this whole piece has so much of stakeholder management and alignment at the heart of it. And aligning with product and sales for a content person is so important before you even get down to any sort of strategy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gone into, content roles where my first priority was, hey, I'm going to dive into the data. We're going to start doing some analysis. We're going to find our content gaps. And you just don't have the context you need to really figure out or help prioritize like what's going to have the most impact. And this is important too for content marketers to think about. Start benchmarking and understand, how your performance is being judged. That way you can have alignment. If you, build all this organic traffic, great. But if that traffic's not doing anything to impact the bottom line, it's not a success. So I think having that context and knowing what's important to the business and how content can contribute to that is really important before you get started.
Right. So you're at Goldcast right now, where you're kind of the event content marketing person, right? And before this, you were with Vistia, and that was the video content marketing space. So 2 very hot kind of spaces. Everyone's talking about events, and obviously the pandemic has changed the game completely. And everyone's also talking about video, and video is at the heart of content marketing right now. So I want to know what are the similarities and differences between these 2 roles? Like where do you think content marketing, your learnings from Vistia are working for you at Goldcast, and vice versa? What are the similarities and differences you see in these 2 spaces?
Yeah, definitely both very hot spaces. I will say I feel lucky to be in such an emerging space. Definitely some similarities across both. I mean, they're both obviously MarTech companies. You're marketing to marketers, which is very fun, but also very challenging at the same time because, marketers know they're being marketed to, right? So it has to be a really high quality. A lot has changed very quickly, I'll say, in these 2 spaces, video and events. So 2020 is when I started at Wistia, which was a huge year for them. They absolutely exploded because people overnight almost were like, hey, we need to figure out a way to reach our audiences in a different way that doesn't involve interacting in person. And we're kind of seeing the same thing at Goldcast, where people, we're throwing these huge in-person events and conferences, and the way we do business has just fundamentally changed. So that's been very similar across both companies. Kind of to that same point, there's a lot of educating still. So a lot of marketers were kind of thrown into creating video content or planning events, especially digital events, webinars, without having a background in that. So there's still a lot of, educating folks and kind of back to the basics type content that I focused on at Wistia and even at Goldcast. In addition to kind of this deeper, rich content for our power users, it really is like very full funnel. There's still a lot of educating folks on how to do great digital events. So that's been exciting and something I saw in both roles. And I think something that was similar to across both companies was that both video and digital events tend to be owned across multiple teams, and we kind of target multiple personas. So at Wistia, video can really live across sales, marketing, customer success, support. There's so many use cases for it. And we're finding that with events as well. Some large companies do have dedicated event marketers, and that's great. Some don't. So some are like me, they're in content and they're also tasked with hosting webinars. Sometimes it lives, even if they have a core events team, they still have product owns it for product launches. And, there's an internal HR team that owns it for company events. So it's been very interesting learning how teams are using a single tool across teams and kind of knowing how to talk to these multiple personas. Those have all been fairly similar. I'll say that I think the key differences that I'm finding are, number one, I think video as a whole is a more mature category, and Wistia has a really strong brand in that space. So that was great for me creating content because, getting results, even in terms of just driving organic traffic, driving links, was a little bit easier. There was also a much higher bar. Wistia has a super strong brand, and that's really important to them. So we had the resources to support that. We had like an internal video team, a video studio, like a dream setup. We had internal writers, we had a very robust design team. We had an editor, we had a dedicated copywriter. So all these things went into making like super top tier branded content, which is great. I think events as a category is mature, but digital events or digital first events, hybrid events, this whole technology aspect is still very new, and people are very much still figuring it out. So we're very much a startup, right? Like we don't have, 10 plus years of authority in this new space. So that's where we're really focused on building that trust, building that authority with our audience, and really perfecting like our point of view, which is great. And just being a little bit smaller too, we can move a little bit faster, be a little bit more agile. So that's a little different. And then finally, I think Wistia, like I mentioned, has a really strong brand, and that's very important to them. What I think Goldcast is a little bit different is while we don't have that brand recognition, people don't necessarily know about us or trust us yet. We are very focused on celebrating and elevating our community of event marketers. So this is like a top line company level goal that is really reflected throughout all of our content and our comms. And I don't think Wistia necessarily had as big of a community focus. So examples of this at Goldcast are, we launched a event marketing and field marketing compensation report and hosted a career workshop for folks. We have an event marketers live show that's dedicated to interviewing, event marketers and event leaders. We released a list earlier this year of top B2B event marketers. So we have this like really strong narrative around event planners, how they're not the same thing as event marketers, and really rallying behind these B2B event professionals. And I think that's been really successful for us. And that's kind of how we're working to building this trust in this brand.
So talking about success, my next question is actually about some campaigns where you feel you have found success. And then how do you, as a content marketer, measure that success?
Yeah, so successful campaigns, I always try and think of content as part of this larger integrated campaign. And right after I started at Goldcast, we launched a compensation report, which, as I mentioned, was kind of tied into our community focus and really wanting to support event marketers. So this entailed surveying our audience of event and field marketers and really asking them to candidly share information about their title, their salaries, bonuses, really anything that went into their compensation. And then we created a report about it. But instead of just, launching it and saying, here you go, launching the report and moving on, which happens a lot in content, I'll be the first to admit, we really tried to focus on building a whole campaign around this.
Hmm.
So we, as part of this launch, we found and partnered with a career coach, and we hosted a workshop style event that served as the launch for this campaign. And we wanted to build, really build that excitement and buzz around it, and provide value to our audience outside of just here's the numbers, here you go. We wanted to help them say, hey, here's a benchmark for your salary, for your career. Come to this event and we'll help you make it even better. We'll help you negotiate a better salary. Like, we'll help you level up your career. So that was kind of the framing of it. We also teased, the report as a way to get people into the actual workshop event. Attendees got their free copy of the report right after they came to the event. And then post-event, we dripped out stats on social for 6 weeks after. We had our design team create some really nice animated images that really stood out on the timelines. And we use these, little dripped out teasers as a way to drive people into the full report, watch the event on demand. And this worked really well on social. It started a lot of conversations, which was important to us. There was a lot of engagement, people tagging their friends in it, people commenting on like, wow, I can't believe, they make this much, or, this type of company versus this type of company. So that was important to us. I think in terms of success metrics, we really considered this a brand campaign, as I mentioned, that leveled up to our overarching goal of supporting and elevating our community, which again is super important to us right now. We're a startup. We don't have all of this built-in authority and trust with people. So this campaign was a way for us to provide something really unique that no other company has offered folks, and to start building this recognition and trust as the authority and expert for B2B event marketers. That said, leads and revenue were not goals for this campaign. There are certainly campaigns that can have those goals, and that's great. For this particular campaign, this was not a goal. Instead, what we did look at were event registrations and attendance. So was this topic resonating with their audience, and were they interested enough to actually show up live to the event? So looking at your, registration to attendee rate was important. We also looked at engagement during the live event. So things like, a live chat. We launched polls during the event. We had Q&A during the event. We had video Q&A where people could come up on stage and interact with our career coach. So really letting us know, are people excited about this topic? Are they sticking around during the event? And then we also looked at social engagement. This is something that we really focus on specifically for LinkedIn. We do not have a full-blown we're everywhere social strategy. We very much focus on LinkedIn because that's where our audience is. So we looked at, for every one of these little drip teaser posts, we looked at, are people liking it? Are people commenting on it? Are people sharing it? Is this starting conversations? And the same with the report itself, looking at engagement on the report. Are people spending time on the page and actually reading it? Are people watching our, workshop on demand? Are they finding value in that? Kind of as a bonus, icing on the cake, we do rank on the first page for event marketing salary, obviously below Glassdoor and some of those other sites you kind of expect. But it was really, a positive signal for us to see, hey, like even search engines agree that there's value in this data and this content that we're able to provide. So wasn't necessarily a goal going into the campaign, but it was really great to see afterwards. And I'll definitely take that as a success metric as well.
So since we're talking about metrics and things like that, I think there's a lot of obsession over measuring the impact of content marketing. Now, I don't know which side of that debate are you on, because there are people who say that you can't really measure it completely and we need to stop being so obsessive over it. But you've also spoken about vanity metrics, right? So in your opinion, what are the right metrics? And in the past, how has that impacted your strategy? Because I think we should be measuring something, but then what is that something?
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out a marketer's favorite answer here. Should you be measuring things, and what are the right metrics? It depends, right? So the way I think about content, and this was not a model that I made up. This was a model that was shared by Animals, which is a pretty well-known content agency specific to B2B companies. But I think about content in 3 buckets: search-driven content, thought leadership content, and sales enablement content. And each of those different types of content have different purposes and should be measured differently. There's no unicorn piece of content that can accomplish all of the things. Maybe there are, and I would love to hear ideas that people have, but that's kind of how I think about it, is you have different types of content for different goals. So understanding, your business and your marketing goals, and then map those to the types of content that are most relevant. And then you can kind of back into some KPIs from there. So broadly speaking, for search-driven content, if you're really trying to drive organic traffic, looking at rankings, looking at your organic traffic, and ideally this compounds over time, and looking at lead gen. These people are coming to your website and, interacting with your content. That's great. But what else are they doing? Is it, valuable enough for them to sign up for an email or free trial, if that's a relevant ask? If you think about something like thought leadership, this is really sharing your point of view and trying to build trust and authority. So, positive indicators of that are links generated. Is it buzzworthy enough to other folks to want to link to it or reference it or share it? Email subscribes. Is this a good enough point of view and strong enough for people to want to subscribe to your email list and hear more from you about this topic? And also just conversations, engagement on social. Like I mentioned, this was something that's important for us on LinkedIn specifically. Are people commenting and engaging with our content that we share there? And then, if you think about something that's more sales enablement or more product focused, this typically tends to be a lot more bottom of funnel. So is this generating leads and converting people? So things like, if you have a product-led growth movement, are you able to get people into your free trial? Are you generating demo requests? Or is this content that the sales team is using during their conversations that helps, move pipeline along or close deals? Those are different things you can look at for these different types of content. I will be the first one to say that I'm still learning a lot in this space. We're right now experimenting with some HubSpot dashboards to track attribution, because we really do want a better picture of what content is working to engage our audience, to generate these leads, to help leads move along, So it's a work in process for sure, but I'm definitely excited to have a little bit more of a holistic, data-driven view. I think qualitatively, you can look at things like people sharing or referencing your content, feedback from the sales team about what's working. We've definitely had people that have responded to sales emails or conversations like, hey, I really love this piece you did on XYZ, or hey, that was a really great event. Thanks so much for sharing. That is, to me, super powerful and a really strong indicator that yes, this is resonating. Or if you have a really strong point of view about something, when people start adopting that language and your ideas, that's how you know that your content is working. I personally thrive off of the qualitative stuff. Numbers are great, but as all marketers know, attribution is totally made up. So I much prefer the type of feedback where someone responds to an email or reaches out and says, hey, I love your content. That's, to me, the strongest signal that says this is working, we're doing something right. So I agree, not, as much as we try to grapple with numbers and coming up with ROI, I think there is a gut feeling to it. And some of that more qualitative stuff is just as important, if not more important, than the actual numbers.
So, let's talk about how you've spoken about multiple things, right? Analytics and sales enablement. I want to understand, how is content marketing structured at Goldcast? How do you guys do it? How big is the team? How do you split all of this up? It's a lot. So how do you manage this?
Yeah, so I am a content team of one. Broadly speaking, from a marketing team perspective, we have our CMO, who's Kishore. He's one of our co-founders. We have Kelly, who is our head of growth. She is Kishore's right-hand woman and is really responsible for running the demand gen engine. So I technically level up to Kelly on the demand gen team, and I am in charge of all of our content operations. So for a content manager, and this was intentional when I took this role, but I really don't do a ton of writing. I am more responsible for the operations side of it. So I do work with a content agency called Pointed Copywriting. They are fantastic, super happy with them. I work with a few freelance writers as well and manage their workflow. I work with an SEO consultant as well. So I'm in charge of managing our search engine growth and kind of our organic growth. So that's kind of what falls in my bucket. I also help, we're an event company. So most folks on our marketing team are somewhat involved in events. So I'm also tasked with running our webinar programming. And like I said, I'm a user of Goldcast. So I do the full planning the topics, sourcing speakers, hosting events, moderating events, post-event follow-up, all that fun stuff as well. So for me, broadly speaking, it's, content ops, the webinars, and SEO are kind of what falls on my team. But it is just me. We have a small events team as well. We have a small in-house design team and web development team, which is really great to have some of those folks to work with as well.
So this outsourcing model works well for you?
It does. It's definitely helpful to be able to have multiple partners that we can work with for, hey, I need this specific thing. Can you handle it? And the turnaround time's pretty quick. So it's definitely been helpful to have those external partners to work with. I think as we grow, we might look to add more internal folks specifically for the content team. But right now, having a handful of external folks that can kind of specialize in specific areas is very helpful.
Interesting, because I ran a poll on my LinkedIn and most people prefer to build in-house teams, at least on my list. So actually I'm going to end with this question. And I think because you're so in this space, you're the best person to answer it. But what do you think is the future of event marketing, and what is the role that content is going to play in that?
Yeah, so the future of event marketing, I work for a digital and hybrid event platform. I'll be the first to admit that in-person events are not going away. There's no substitution. I'm going to an event next week that I'm really excited about. There's absolutely no substituting the value of connecting with people in person, full stop. But there is a ton of opportunity in the digital and hybrid space. So I do think that, again, broad strokes here, I think that more companies are going to pull back on these huge, large 4-day conferences. Not every company. I don't see inbound going anywhere, right? But for every other company out there, I think that the spend is just so high and it's really hard to determine the return on that versus doing much smaller, more thoughtful, intimate events. So planning more field events, more, small localized events. Road shows is something that I've seen more company do where they hit a few cities and host more curated events for a smaller group of people, and also embracing more of the digital events and hybrid events. So I think there's a lot of room to grow for digital, especially for people that do it well. Digital events does not mean hosting a webinar. You're talking at the screen for an hour with slides. That's not a digital event. Really thinking thoughtfully about the experience and how you can provide value to your audience, and also embrace the convenience of digital, having the option, the flexibility of hybrid. These are things that event teams are really going to have to think through when they're thinking about how they're creating this holistic event strategy. So smaller in-person events, more digital and hybrid events. Where does content play a part? I really think that, again, thinking about the campaign model to marketing is the smartest way to approach this. And I think events are such a great opportunity to think about it as a campaign. So you have a cornerstone event or this moment in time, but then you take all of this great content from this event and continue to recycle that and repurpose that content. So take your individual sessions, instead of just hosting it on demand and sending out an email and calling it a day. How can you repurpose every single session into a dedicated piece of content, a guide, breaking it down on social. There's so many different things that you can do with your event content outside of just hosting the event. So I think the smartest teams out there are going to really embrace this campaign approach and say, hey, we're doing this huge cornerstone event. Great. This is going to fuel our content flywheel for the next 6 months. So that's where I see content playing a part in that.
Yeah. So do you think community is going to start playing a much bigger role when it comes to content marketing, specific to event or even overall? Because I just hear this word now being spoken so closely linked to content, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, community is definitely a very buzzy term right now, but I do think companies that do it well and really crack the community code are going to be more successful. I think there's a lot of people even figuring out, what does a community mean for us? What does it look like? So it's more than just, a Slack group and having people sign up and, chatting on Slack. I really think it is like super understanding your persona or your users, defining what type of community you have. There's all sorts of different types of communities. Do you want to have just a user or a customer community? Do you want to be a little bit more open to just, your target persona and make it more of a thought leadership type community? So I think there's a lot more strategy that goes into community than people think when they just hear the word community. So I think it is more work than people think when they sign up for it. But I do think that the companies and the brands that do it well will find success if they dedicate the time and resources to really nurturing those folks.
Okay, perfect. I think that's it from me, Meisha. Thank you so much for making the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.